Good morning, Omniwebbers. Random Block here, and wanted to spend a bit of time today talking about the MVP for the Twitter leaderboard. So this is the Twitter leaderboard in the test environment, and you'll see that a number of the community members are appearing on the leaderboard at the moment, and they've got a set of points based on their engagement metrics, which leads to a score. Now, this all looks very nice and very simple, standard leaderboard. But what I wanted to do is spend a bit of time talking about just what makes this leaderboard different. And it kind of goes back to a conversation that we were having some weeks ago about the fact that often when we see these Twitter leaderboards, they're not very transparent and they're not really very open and verified. And with the demos technology, could we build something that's slightly different as an experiment to see how we could leverage the demos technology to build a trustless Twitter leaderboard? And I wanted to talk through that a little bit today, and we'll talk about how DAHR verification makes this possible, what that means about scoring and how that scoring is transparent and immutable. We'll look at some of the cross-chain tech and how Demos enables that, and how this system could be, isn't quite yet, but totally could be totally autonomous. Okay, so let's take us a little step back and think about some of the problems we have with these traditional systems. So there's often centralized control. So there's often a database that sits behind these systems, and there's an algorithm and there's scoring that isn't very clear and isn't very open to the community. And the reason for that, people say, is so people can't game the system. But what if we turned that on its head a little bit and we made a leaderboard that is, openly and transparently about engagement, and we were very clear around how we were going to drive the points and therefore the incentives around this engagement. And we were able to prove that the metrics that are in the leaderboard are authentic. So a little bit there around the DAHR, which we'll come on to in a little bit, but that's the key part of how the incentives leaderboard enables a new type of application that we haven't really seen on the blockchain before. So how does it work? So at a high level, this is the architecture. So we have the user, and the user's linked their Twitter using the demos identity solution. So we understand that a user owns that identity and they can link multiple different identities. And that's how we kind of start to build that digital presence and digital identity that spans Web 3 and Web 2. Then we're using the DAHR technology, and the DAHR technology is all about enabling Web 2 data to be brought on chain in a verifiable way. Now, that Web 2 data could come from a centralized source, but through DAHR, we're able to verify the originator of that source, and that source hasn't been tampered with. We're then able to store that on the demos chain to store that proof. And then we're able to use the demos cross-chain messaging solution to push that across to another chain, another supported chain. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're using Ethereum Sepolia. I don't think when we go live we'll use Ethereum Sepolia. We won't use Ethereum. We'll probably use a layer 2 or something like that. But this is kind of in test at the moment. So this is a bit more detail around how that initial process works. So you as the user, Random Block is on Twitter, and I'm posting, I'm liking, I'm retweeting around a project. And in this instance, what we're looking for is posts that include Demos Network as the handle. So I've posted a tweet around Demos Network, and that post has got a certain amount of likes and retweets and comments and engagement, basically views, and that derives a score. And that algorithm I expect to change over time, depending on what we see when we actually launch this. That algorithm can change it, on a week by week basis. But the important thing is that DAHR fetches that data and it creates the hash, and the hash is proving what time you got that data, where that data came from, and any calculations that happened on that data. And that enables anybody to come in and say, okay, did you use this algorithm? Was it the data? Did the data come from the correct source? Was it done at the time you said it was? And that's then stored on the blockchain to give a permanent record. So at any point in time, we can go back and say, this is totally open, totally fair, and totally transparent. And so, why does this matter? You can't falsify your Twitter metrics. There's no black box in this. It's totally open. Every data point, every time you update the contract, you have that cryptographic proof. All historical data is permanently stored on chain. And all of our rankings will be based on verified engagements, not claims. Now, as I said before, that doesn't mean we won't change the algorithm. That doesn't mean, as we learn more, and we all know about bots and people gaming the system and that sort of stuff, and totally expect that to happen. But as we understand more around how people do that, we can change the algorithm, and at any point in time, people will be able to understand what the algorithm is and therefore position themselves in the best way to get the incentives that they want. All done in an open and transparent way, which I think brings us back to one of the core principles of what we're trying to achieve in Web3. Now, we talked a little bit about the identity verification. I expect a number of people that are watching this have seen the other videos on YouTube around identity. But just if you haven't, there is a step before kind of running the leaderboard. You have to have attested your Twitter identity onto the Demos blockchain. Okay, so what we're doing there is we're saying, yes, Random Block owns this Twitter identity. Then we can say, okay, what's the engagement that Random Block has given for our project? So in order to do that, I have to go on to identity.demos.sh. I connect or create my Demos wallet. I then generate a proof that I post onto Twitter, and then verify that on the Demos chain, and that then links my identity. And you can do this for various different Web2 and Web3 platforms, and that's how we get that digital reputation and verification solution starting to work, which is then what you can use things like the Twitter leaderboard for. And then when we go into the interface, I think the interface seems pretty standard. It's everything that's going on in the back end that makes this pretty cool and pretty funky. We're going in there, we're seeing the metrics, we're seeing the scores that we've got, we're seeing that it was updated by this DAHR hash, which pulled the data on. You're able to view those attestations. You're able to understand when the contract was updated and how it was updated, and it's all transparent on the explorers like Etherscan, for example, or the Demos Explorer, for example. Then we have the Ethereum smart contracts. So I'm not going to spend very long on this. It's currently deployed in the test system on Ethereum Sepolia. It's got a number of things you could then query on the smart contract to pull out that information. So, again, being public, having that transparency, being immutable, being verified and open 24/7, moving away from that black box that we see so much in the InfoFi space, which I think ultimately leads to nefarious behaviours. And at the end of the day, from a these projects, we're looking for engagement. We shouldn't hide away from that. That's what the projects are about. But we want to incentivize the right type of engagement, which means the algorithm should be good enough that you can publish them. And if they're not good enough, you can then change the algorithm rather than have them hidden behind this black box type approach to how you incentivize people. And it's all very secret squirrel. It's not really the approach of demos. And then, once we get to the cross-chain kind of architecture, really simple. There's a DAHR proof. That proof is doing, as I said before, testing that the right algorithm was used, testing that the source was the correct source, the time that it happened. Okay, and that's coming onto the demos chain. And then the demos cross-chain messaging is then pushing that across to the Ethereum chain. So do I think that this is fully fledged and fully production ready? Probably not. It's probably an MVP at this point in time. But I think it's a good one to test. And if we get to the point where it is production ready, it will probably be a very different way of approaching InfoFi and kind of how you can inspire and incentivize engagement across your project, but doing it in a way that comes back to the core principles of Web3 and using the Omniweb to blend Web2 and Web3 together. Again, we've got the immutable records. It's publicly verifiable. There is no single point of failure in the chain system. There's obviously a single point of failure when you're going out to an individual API. Now, for other applications, you can use multiple APIs to get this information. Just that, in the MVP of this, we're just using one singular API, and the algorithm is transparent. So all scoring logic is on chain. Now, I did have this down as a bit of a bold statement that says, this is the world's first. I'm not entirely sure of that, so I put a question mark there. I think this is an unlocked achievement. I think this is a step forwards. Is it a world first? I'm sure we'll find out soon when we launch this and other people say they already have it or they don't. But it's certainly a pioneering solution that starts to enable people to understand how you can bring Web 2 and Web 3, the best of Web 2 and the best of Web 3 together to build new types of systems and solutions. And that's really what the Omniweb's all about. Let's keep it decentralized where we can. Let's verify it cryptographically. Let's remove away from these black box type systems where they're trying to hide away what the real measures are, metrics are, and what really is driving their objectives. I don't think we live in a world where we want to do that anymore. And we've applied it here to a social media leaderboard, but we can apply that to anything. Okay, thank you very much. I've been Random Block. Leaderboard coming out next few days, hopefully. And so you'll get to see it and get to try it. Thank you. Goodbye.